which things were a pain in the neck. So it works. There's a lot of information for North Central Florida. There's some for South Florida too. So everybody gets a copy of my book, and I'll even sign it if you want, because eventually I'm going to be the most famous gardening writer in the world. So just working up to it.
And he's not going to be in this area.
No, I'm going to be somewhere. Don't know where.
Yeah, of course, doesn't mean you're not going to come back either.
No, Florida's always been my home.
Yeah.
And I grew up here. I was born here.
I'm going to go grab my $10 from the car. I'll be right back.
There's a couple of folks in the bathroom, so we'll just wait on them and start tootling around. Anybody have a food forest system or visited one before?
I have. Yeah.
Just starting. Where are you starting it?
Polk County.
Polk County. Okay.
Here, yeah.
I lived in Frostproof for a while.
Oh my God, so did I.
I love Frostproof.
Really?
It was so quiet. Yeah, we lived in the middle of the orange groves in a trailer, and it was like right on the lake, and we could go down to the dock on the lake and watch the sunset every night. It was just totally peaceful, and the lake was closed to motorboats, so we would just take canoes out there and, you know, with the kids and stuff.
You ever heard of Blue Jordan Forest in Frostproof?
Yeah, we were. Was it off the Lake Reedy Boulevard?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I went hiking back there once. I'm pretty sure that's the one I went.
Subdivision.
Oh, okay. Then no. Then there was a forest like park that was right next to our community. But we were in the middle of the orange groves, and when that would start blooming, it was crazy.
Oh, you can smell it probably.
Thank you.
Yeah, we thought about moving to Frostproof for permanent, but we just enjoyed it for a while.
Yeah, for a while it was a good amount of time.
It was so quiet. It was great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Polk County, you have that real white sugar sand. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge is the soil, and I found that the fire ants were worse there than any place I've been in the state.
Oh, that's bad.
It was incredible. Our neighborhood had a super colony of fire ants where they wouldn't fight with each other. They were all basically interconnected, which is not what you want. They actually, we did the laundry and left the laundry basket on the porch, and they got into the laundry and were eating the clothes.
Oh my God.
And we figured out it must have been either fabric softener or something that they liked. They actually chewed holes all the way across the top of one of my wife's dresses. That was insane. They were horrible. But yeah, I was like, I would almost, you know, I almost want to just invite Ortho to come out and torch the whole neighborhood and then apologize later. It was, they were incredible.
If they were that bad, I could understand that.
Yeah, and they got in, they were crawling in and out of the outlets in the house that we were in. Like you leave, you make a sandwich on the counter, and like 3 minutes later, they were carrying crumbs away, you know.
Yeah, and then you're out of outlets, you're looking at fire hazard there.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know what they're eating. Polk County, you've got a nice mild climate. I visited a fellow down there who had about 30 trees in his backyard. He was successfully growing papaya.
Yeah.
You know, do you have papaya? He says he would lose them about every 3 or 4 years. Just, you know, freeze the tree
You can grow
down.
mangoes. I've seen huge mangoes in Frostproof.
I saw he had a great mango tree, but it wasn't bearing any mangoes, and I don't know if it was his tree or you actually have some that are bearing. You've seen?
No, I've seen. I just planted some in my yard, but in Frostproof, there was a house we were almost going to buy that had avocados and mangoes, and they were huge.
Oh, that's marvelous. The avocados have had trouble with the blight.
I'm in Brooksville, and south end of Brooksville, north end of Land O'Lakes, and there's a guy out there that's got mango trees all over the place.
And they fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I tried it first we moved in here. I planted about 6 mango trees just to see if it was possible, and no, I can't do it. I've tried canistel, I tried jackfruit, you know, tuck them in the shade, tuck them under a tree, you know. Just, I keep hoping that the genetics will, you know, turn up a lucky coin one of these days. Just keep planting seeds and seeing, you know, and it may happen. But
Well, what he did was he's got a lot of oak trees, a thick patch of oak trees, and all of his southern stuff was planted under the oak trees.
He's got the microclimate for the cold nights.
Yeah.
Oaks are incredible how much
amazing.
warmth they hold in.
He said it's a recorded 10-degree difference between under the oaks and not under the oaks.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that too. I mean, in the trunk of an oak is a column of water. If you view it as a column of water, the thermal mass of water is incredible. and it keeps things from freezing right next to the trunk.
Yeah, it's like
I've
putting
got
a,
pineapples growing around my oak trees here,
Oh, wow.
and if they're out in the open, they're dead, but they don't die underneath the oaks.
yeah, it's like putting a water barrel in your greenhouse.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we had 8 water barrels in the greenhouse, and we never had to keep it warm. It never went below 32, and it never went over about 92. Even in the hottest day, if we had it all shut, it wouldn't roast the plants. It was incredible because that during the day the water kept it cool, during the night it kept it warm. It's just takes a lot of energy to shift the state of water colder or hotter. You know.
Yeah.
All right, so
You probably just didn't have enough
is
water.
it ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm David Goodman. My pen name is David the Good, so if you hunt for me online, there were so many David Goodmans, it's like the John Smith of names, except they were mostly doctors, lawyers, and people that were much more successful than me. So I went with David the Good as my pen name because I thought it was funny. And I've got 4 books on Amazon under that name, a book on extreme composting, 2 books on Florida gardening, and then a book on survival gardening that just came out a week ago called Grow or Die, The Good Guide to Survival Gardening, which is basically grid down tools, gardening without gasoline and all that kind of stuff. And I actually have 3 of the, I've got 2 books in the top 3 of the vegetable gardening section of Amazon at the moment. I saw that this morning. I was like, wow, it's, yay, all right. My publisher is very happy with me. So, but this here is, this is almost all either edible, useful, or attracting to pollinators or wildlife of some sort. I started this food forest 5 years ago, and in this climate it really takes about 5 years for stuff to start kicking. I mean, your earliest trees, like if you wanted food next year, you would want to plant mulberries because they usually fruit the year after you get them. You're going to get a couple of handfuls of mulberries, and you would plant a bunch of annual gardens. But I tried to plant things that will mature over a series of time, starting 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So every year we've had new stuff come into production. The longer stuff is like pears and pecans are the longest end of the spectrum at 8 to 10 years from planting. Often they start producing. What I did here, it's hard to see because I've got, you see these massive sunflowers all over the place. Those are, I'll give you all cuttings of those you can take home. They are a nutrient accumulating plant that has grown that tall from the ground this year. Every year they grow up to 20 foot tall, and they pull up a lot of phosphorus and micronutrients from the soil. So I grow them in between all of the other plants as a way of growing fertilizer and compost in place. So they get chopped usually and dropped. I'll often cut them multiple times during the year and throw them around the bases of the fruit trees to feed them and to mulch them. The biggest enemy of the soil here in Florida is just having the soil bare. Everybody wants to grow grass. This is a dumb place to grow grass. Usually the only time grass is part of the main habitat is when you either have grazing animals or frequent forest fires, or grass fires. So all the bigger stuff gets cleared out and you've got grass. So, you've got cows or you've got wildebeest or whatever else that are going along and they're grazing it to keep it shorter and keep the big stuff from popping up, and then they're going and manuring it afterwards. So what we normally do is we graze it with a lawnmower, and then we get out our fertilizer and we manure it to try and keep it happy. And if you see all the, a beautiful St. Augustine lawn down in Ocala or in Gainesville or whatever, that's not a natural state. That is a low-level ecosystem that takes a lot of work to maintain. Florida wants to be forest. I mean, you look at this lot across the street from me here. That lot is an undeveloped lot. It's been sitting there. It's 1 acre, and it's mixed hardwoods with occasional pines. And it's nobody is feeding it or tending it or anything else, and it always looks green. Trees die, they fall to the ground, they rot, they become something new. There's woodpeckers that live in that dead tree right there. There's all kinds of stuff that's happening in the woods, and it takes care of itself. But as soon as you cut the woods down and you chop it out and you burn it, and then you try to plant grass, you're trying to maintain a real low-level ecosystem. If you walk away from your grass for 10 years, your yard will turn into a forest here in Florida. It's going to regenerate. First thing that's going to happen, you're going to get pigweed starting to pop up, and you're going to get perennial weeds. You'll get Biden's alba and thistles and all that kind of stuff starts popping up, and you get blackberries and sumacs are usually a couple of the first things that come in. You may get air potatoes and mimosa trees or paper mulberries, other really fast plants that volunteer and they start taking over. And eventually the oaks and the acorns get dropped and they come back and you've got woods and you'll have oak and hickory and everything else. It will come back because that's the ecosystem that Florida wants to be. So what I decided to do, when I bought this house, this was all grass out here with a few oaks. We knocked a few of the oaks down because they were time bombs. They were water oaks, and we had, within a few weeks of moving in, one of them fell in the yard, one of them fell across the street, one of them fell in the neighbor's yard, and it's like, you know, first of all, they're taking up a lot of the sunshine where I can plant fruit trees, and second of all, that's a time bomb. I don't really want that going on next to me. So we moved the ones away from the house, and we started planting other plants. That tree right there, that's quite tall there, that's a black cherry. And that's a native black cherry with edible cherries on it. And that tree I planted when it was this tall. It was one of the earlier trees we put in. There's a mulberry right there with a birdhouse hanging on the other side of it. So what I did first was identify what are the tallest trees and put them in first. And then around those tall trees, I start packing in other bits and pieces. I thought of the yard in a series of islands, working from the house outwards for the most part. This part of the yard has pretty poor soil. This part of the yard has pretty good soil. It's interesting, there was almost a division at the driveway of drier, harder ground over here and richer, deeper, loamy soil over here. And you can see the difference between the two sides, how alive this side looks. You know, that the bananas are even thriving, which, you know, that they don't like it over here. And so getting the ground covered with lots of mulch was a big help. The city, the power company, pays people to come through and do it. And this was dropped 2 years ago, and you see it looks like bagged potting soil. Soil does not normally look like that in Florida. And we had about 2 foot dropped over this big area and just let it rot. And one of the big mistakes I think we make in our yards is that we have a tree and it drops a bunch of leaves, so we rake the leaves up and we bag them and we put them by the road. Or we mow them up and shred them and they disappear. Keeping any kind of biomass on the ground is really important, and a forest is very good at recycling nutrients and keeping stuff going. So I'll take you around, I'll show you the kind of the canopy trees and then the trees that feed them, and we can just sort of wander around through. Well, we could start right here and we'll walk past and I'll show you one of my weird grafting experiments to begin with. All these logs here, I had my neighbors give me their yard waste. They think I'm insane and they may be correct. This is a little bit hard to get through. This is actually Jamaican sorrel, if any of you aren't familiar with this plant. It's also called Florida cranberry. And take a piece of these things and eat it. It tastes like a cranberry. And it's very sour and delicious. And it makes the best faux cranberry sauce you have ever had. My wife Rachel makes it for Thanksgiving every year. It's an annual hibiscus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Here, I was going to say, peel off a piece and pass it on.
Break off a piece of the outside. The middle of those is a little hard pod that's like okra and it's no good to eat.
It's not as hard as cranberries. It probably would make a nicer cranberry sauce.
It's a little smoother. Yeah, it doesn't have that bitterness of cranberries. And the leaves are also edible too. They taste lemony tart, kind of like a instant Caesar salad.
Nice.
Great plant. It's an annual hibiscus. It grew that big from seed this year. It'll die to the ground. It'll self-seed and usually comes back. I get a few of them here and there. Okay. Anybody know what this ugly little tree is right here?
Looks like an apple.
It's a relative.
Plum.
It's a far-off relative that's related. It's in the greater rose family. This is a Chickasaw plum. This is our native. This is a native Florida plum.
Really?
And the Chickasaw plum makes a little sweet sour fruit. Some of them are almost inedible. They're so sour. It's about that big. And sometimes you'll get a tree that's got pretty sweet plums on it. People don't really improve or breed them. They just kind of, hey, I have a little wildlife habitat. I'll plant some natives, and they throw one of these in there. They haven't really been bred as the fruit. But because they're native and they're real scrappy trees, They resist the nematodes. They live in this soil. They will survive in terrible conditions and still produce fruit. They also can be used as a rootstock for other plants in the greater prunus family. Now the prunus is your stone fruits, cherries, nectarines, peaches. Those are all stone fruit. Quite a few of them can be grafted onto this tree. So what I did was, this tree makes terrible suckers. So the commercial people hate it because there's suckers everywhere. That's a little Chickasaw sucker. Actually, the root system is so incredible. This is a Chickasaw sucker right here.
From there.
That's from this tree.
Oh my gosh.
This tree will make, naturally in the woods, it kind of grows underneath your tall oaks and cherries and all that stuff, and it makes little thickets. Where there's some blooms here, and then you get a bunch of little fruit where it's sunny, and there's no fruit where it's not sunny. But I grafted on first, this is a European improved plum, big purple plum. I grafted it right here. This is a sucker off of the Chickasaw, a Chickasucker. And I grafted in, as an experiment, a piece that was this big of a improved plum from the University of Florida. So that was last February, not this February, but the last one, and it grew this much. And we actually had a dozen big purple plums off of this one branch in the summer of this year. And I talked to the guy that does fruit tree breeding for University of Florida, and he was telling me, he says, you can graft nectarines, you can graft peaches, you can graft plums. And I was like, no way, I'm going to try that. So this spring, this was my first graft that it took. I didn't know anything about grafting. I stuck 5 grafts on it. That one took, and I was so excited. And it grew so fast and bore fruit within a year. I decided this spring to do it again. So in February, I did a lot more research on grafting and did a lot more grafts until I was good at it. This is nectarine grafted onto Chickasaw plum. Look at how bizarre. See the joint? Yeah. Nectarine is a much more vigorous tree than Chickasaw plum. That's Chickasaw plum. That's nectarine from here on up. This was grafted in February, which gives you an idea how vigorous a rootstock this stuff is. It's pulling nutrition from all over. If I took a nectarine tree and planted it in a yard here, it would take me probably 2 years for it to start putting on this kind of growth. This was 6 inches of nectarine. That was the original tip of it. 6 inches of nectarine turned into, this one is almost 6 foot of nectarine, maybe 5 foot. So these 2 are nectarines I stuck on here. And now the reason, because this, the other improved fruits have more vigorous growth, you see how they're thicker, it chokes them back a little bit, but it also makes them fruit really quick. So the year after you do a graft, you will get fruit if you've got an established rootstock. But I had to tie up poles or else it would fall over. The plums were just falling into the pathway. And I'll have to do the same thing with this here. But if I wanted to, I could let any of these shoots that are over here or whatever else come up, get to a certain size, then graft onto them and do the same thing over and over again. On this side of the tree, hey, how are you? It's good to see you again. Good to see you. We finally made it. This is either a peach or a plum over here. I grafted on peaches, plums, and I've kind of lost track. I'll find out when they fruit.
So it won't change the flavor or anything of the fruit that it produces. It just gets it's
No,
using the rootstock.
we got the most amazing big sweet plums off of that branch.
Okay.
Rootstock can have some effect. I've heard some people say that with apple rootstocks they've had apples that don't exactly taste like they would on, say, a seed-grown tree or one that was grafted on a typical rootstock. It influences a little bit by the minerals that it delivers. It may be slightly different, but it's compatible enough to support those fruits. So I actually, I got so excited about it, I went out with some budwood in February, and there's an empty lot down the street from me with that had a wild plum hanging over the fence. So I took some peach pieces down there and grafted it in. The neighbor that owns it doesn't know I did that. So one of these days, I'm just imagining, he doesn't do anything with the lot except they play back there, his kids, So I'm imagining one day they're going to be like, why are there peaches growing back here? I was like, I don't think that's really vandalism. You know, it's reverse vandalism.
It's plantalism.
It was funny enough. Yeah.
Guerrilla gardening. Yeah.
How can you get mad at somebody for giving you a peach tree? You know,
Guerrilla gardening.
urban areas. Yeah,
That's actually what it's
California,
called, guerrilla
flowering
gardening, when you
pears, like
plant
the
where you're not
Bradford
supposed to.
pear, which is people grow up because it has all these beautiful blooms on it, but it doesn't make much worth eating. Yeah, I saw they were grafting in living, different pear varieties onto these flowering trees, and you can do that. A lot of the ornamentals, you maybe there's something edible you can graft onto.
So because this is Chickasaw plum and that's a native, does that make the rootstock more vigorous?
The rootstock is super vigorous, yeah, and the nematodes will destroy peaches down here unless you have nematode-resistant rootstock. This thing, the nematodes don't, it doesn't bother it. So yeah, it's very vigorous, and it's not a very big tree, so it's easy to work with. Plus, I like to graft onto the suckers. And then all the stuff, when this gets too thick like this, I just go around and clear it out every once in a while, and just make it work for me. This here, greening has been a problem in the state with citrus. Everybody's probably familiar with the citrus industry getting knocked out. I tell people don't plant citrus, but then I went ahead and planted citrus myself anyways. Because basically, if you plant a citrus now, chances are it's going to get sick and die within the next 5 years or so. I mean, it's pretty hopeless. They've been growing the same plants on the same ground for so long. It's accumulated so many. Every citrus disease in the world, it seems like, is now here in Florida. And there's dead groves all over the place that are just breeding grounds for citrus pests. So I said, don't plant a citrus. I mean, plant something that doesn't have disease issues, and maybe plant citrus some point in the future. If you have a citrus tree, take care of it. But as an experiment, since I know that greening is a big problem, greening is spread by citrus psyllids, which are a little insect that jumps all over the place. Guava has been reported to repel citrus psyllids. So I planted this little tree and I made a little support guild around it. And the support guild is guava right here. This is a cold hardy guava variety called strawberry guava. Jury's out on whether or not it contains the same compounds. Somebody has told me, oh no, they don't have it. But I have not seen any tests that say it doesn't have it. A very similar smell to regular guava. It may or may not have the same compounds. But hopefully, they have found that intercropping guava and citrus has repelled psyllids. And we can't grow tropical guava here, so, and then beside that, I have this cassia. This is a Christmas cassia. It's a real common ornamental plant. It's also a very good nitrogen fixer. You see how the leaves are so green. I'm not piling fertilizer on this thing. It's making its own fertilizer beneath the soil. So this is giving, every time I cut it back, I've cut it back a couple of times. You can see the chop here. Every time I cut it back, it drops some nitrogen into the soil. So I'm feeding the fertilizer from that. And then over here, this is a insect repelling. Doesn't repel roaches apparently. Wild roach there. It's a lemongrass, which repels a lot of different insects. So I've got this here, and then I threw a couple more plants around it. Anytime, the more plants you mix together, the less your pest problems are, because they get confused. When you have a bunch of citrus in rows and it's the only thing, every citrus pest sees that as a big buffet. And it's the same thing in your garden. If you plant a row of cabbages and you get cabbage worms on a couple, it's jump, 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 jump. The cabbage moth goes all the way down. But if you plant a cabbage and then you plant some tomatoes and you plant a few of this and a few of that and some herbs and some flowers and you leave some weeds, definitely leave weeds near your garden, not necessarily in it, but patches of weeds are places where all of the predators hang out. That's their hotels, So the more stuff you've got growing around a citrus, if I had this one citrus in the middle of bare grass, it's in much more danger because it's like, oh, there's a citrus, boom! And if I have multiple citrus, like everybody wants a real pretty row, don't do that. If you want to do a row, plant a citrus, plant a loquat, plant a mulberry, plant a Japanese persimmon, then plant another citrus. Don't, put them in a row, everything jumps and all the diseases jump. So this is Mexican tree spinach here, which we eat. This is a little ornamental canna. Cannas have edible blooms. This is another nitrogen fixer. This is called coral bean. It's a native nitrogen fixer. It's got bright red beans you can use to poison fish or your enemies.
Yeah, don't eat them.
Is it also
It's a
known as the
nitrogen
wild
fixer, yeah.
poinsettia?
Wild poinsettia, no.
No? Okay.
Those are growing
So
here. They have
what
similar
did you
leaves.
call this?
This is called coral bean.
Okay.
And it makes brilliant tubular flowers in the spring that attract hummingbirds. And it's got a big root. It's a perennial. It's a big fat root beneath the ground. It grows up and freezes back every year. It's very pretty. It's unfortunately not edible. The beans are really not all that poisonous. You have to chew them up to poison yourself, and most people don't have that kind of effort.
Also known as kaya.
Yep. Mexican tree spinach.
Okay, and
Yeah.
is it edible raw and
No.
cooked?
No,
No,
you
no,
gotta
no, no.
cook it
Yeah.
at least 10 minutes, and I've heard some people say 20. I often do 10 minutes. My wife does 20, but you know, that's why she's in charge of the kids. So anyhow, so I mixed in all these different species. This is actually turmeric ginger growing here. And all these things kind of interrelate, and it makes the tree safer. The tree may still get greening, you know, it happens, but I'll bet you my trees in here are a lot safer than the average trees, and they're certainly safer than growing them in a grove. We can wander around this way. I'll show you some more stuff. There's all kinds of interesting things going on. That's a citrus right here. Actually, this is, if you're not familiar with it, this is a calamandan. Anybody know this tree? This is, when I was a kid down in Fort Lauderdale, a lot of people had these trees. Back in the 50s and 60s, the ladies of the house knew what to do with this tree. This tree was the marmalade tree. This is like my grandmother had one of these trees. It was like, and then at some point the information got lost and everybody cut them down. They're like, that's sour, or that's a rootstock, or that's horrible, or that's whatever. This is also where you get Campari. It's one of the ingredients in Campari, which is a very good Italian liqueur that's very bitter and sweet at the same time. Very good for your stomach. Good for dealing with guilt, depression. No, really. It's a great liqueur, and this is the flavor. If anybody wants to try it, it's you can section up a few of these. They peel like a tangerine. If anybody wants to be a peeler, you share those out, and they're. If you smell the oils on it, it's so aromatic. It's the skin too. It's very zesty, and the center of it is super sour, like more sour than a lemon. One time I had stomach flu and I couldn't eat anything. I was so ill. But somebody brought me a bunch of these from a tree that they had, and I was just drinking seltzer water and calamandans, and it kept my stomach felt better. And the vitamin C, is good for you. When you make these into marmalade, it makes the most incredible marmalade you've ever had. My children will eat them right off the tree by the handfuls. Most people that I let try them are like, this is a heck of a citrus, but this is a seasoning citrus. It's not a fresh eating citrus. It's got its place, and it's not a very big tree. They're very cold hardy, down into the teens. They're one of the most cold hardy citrus you can grow. But beautiful tree. I planted this when it was about 2 foot tall, and these here, I don't let these sunflowers get too tall. I cut them over and over again, and this is how I feed the tree. Just go through. It's mulch and it's fertilizer, and you can see all the sticks from the many times I've done this. When I feel like it's getting too much shade, I just come around and do it again. Just
Chop and drop.
Chopping it and dropping it.
Yeah.
This is another cool plant here you've probably seen growing. This is the Pindo palm. Anybody seen the Pindo palm before? It's also called the wine palm or the jelly palm. The fruit tastes like coconut and pineapple and tropical fruit, but it's very fibrous. So it's a great tasting fruit, but it's got a lot of fiber in it. It makes the most incredible jam or jelly that you've ever had. I mean, it's an incredible tropical fruit flavor, and people will usually give you the entire fruit stalk because they go, oh, that's messy, I don't like it, I don't want it. So multiple times I've just gone and gotten a whole fruit stalk. Take it, People don't know what it is. It's 40 pounds of fruit. You can make, 20 little jars of jelly out of it, and it's incredible. So
does it numb your mouth when you eat it? Because it does come out.
did it burn, like sting a little bit?
Yeah, or numb or something like that.
Some of them are more. I've had some that are more sweet, and I've had more that you can feel it.
Yeah, okay.
It helps to put sugar in it.
Okay.
So for those of you that are offended by sugar, I apologize.
What's the vine on the ground growing underneath it?
This is a sweet potato variety. The sweet potatoes have basically escaped and naturalized in my yard. I've dropped sweet potatoes and I've stuck them in here and there. You can eat the leaves on sweet potatoes and you can eat the roots. So we come out and pick greens They make a nice ground cover because they keep the weeds from getting too tall, and they shade the ground and keep it moist. Anywhere that you've grown sweet potatoes, the ground looks kind of nice underneath it after you pull them out. Oh yeah.
Have a nice. All right, we got to go.
Oh, you gotta go.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. Grab yourself a copy of my book off the front porch there. I've got a little stack I'm leaning on the right there. Thank you. This is another nitrogen fixer, which it's very beautiful earlier in the year. This one is actually making seeds. Most years it freezes too soon for it to make seeds, but if anybody can tell me what this is, I'll give you some seeds.
No.
Nope. I'll tell you, it's got.
It does, but it's not.
It's got beautiful flowers that look. They're 5-petaled orange flowers. It's all over the Caribbean and the islands and down in South Florida. Similar, same greater family. Yeah, it's actually called dwarf poinciana, or pride of Barbados, and it's got blooms that look just like a poinciana, but it's actually a desert tree. I'll just throw it. There may be enough seeds that we could share some if anybody wants to grow it. It's really beautiful. It freezes to the ground every year, and then comes back from the ground and blooms. Yeah, most of those are not ready, but he wants seeds. There's probably about 12 seeds in there, and I would leave it on the counter to dry out probably. Maybe you'll have to just share it later when you grow your own. But it's a nice nitrogen fixer because it freezes to the ground. It never gets too tall. Some of the nitrogen fixers you got to go around and cut down every year. This one is self-pruning. I mean, this wood is real soft. It's got some thorns on it, which are not very pleasant. You can see right off the trunk there's some thorns. There's some thorns on the bottom of the leaves too. But the blooms are so beautiful when it comes in. It's like being at a Caribbean resort. You walk past just this spray of beautiful orange-red flowers. And the regular Royal Poinciana, I haven't been able to get to bloom here. It freezes really badly.
Which fruit tree do you recommend planting a tree like that next to?
Any fruit tree. Any fruit tree I would plant nitrogen fixtures next to. Yeah. I would plant coral beans around the base. I would plant any short nitrogen fixers you can find. I mean, some of the weeds around here, you can usually tell if a weed's a nitrogen fixer by the shape of the leaves. Like this is a nitrogen fixer. You want to look for things that look like they're in the bean and pea family. See the three leaves like a pea plant? Very similar. And your mimosa type leaves. The mimosa tree is a great nitrogen fixer. I had a friend of mine tell me, I'm going to plant a food forest. So I had them come out and cut down all the mimosa trees and clear out all the invasives. I'm like, you should have just left the mimosa trees there, planted your fruits in between them, and just keep cutting them at the ground. Because they'll grow back. They'll grow 8 feet, 10 feet a year. You just keep cutting it, throw it on the ground, cut it, throw it on the ground. Every time you do that, it drops nitrogen. And also, if you let it get tall like this, if you have a tree that's kind of tender, you might just leave it there through the winter, and it's just the sticks overhead, a little bit of canopy will help protect the little trees. So I love the invasive plants. I just make them work for me. One of my books, Compost Everything, I've got a chapter called Dealing with Stupid, Worthless Trees. You know, this tree is so irritating, it's so invasive, I hate it, I've cut it 100 times. You've made mulch 100 times. You know, every time you cut that tree down, you can drop those sticks and let them rot. The fungi eat them first, and then the soil gets it, and then your trees get it. So you got something that's a pain in the neck. You got to look at it a different way. You got to look at it, it's making biomass out of basically nothing. You know, sunshine and water, and you can feed that to the plants you actually like. So if you got a plant that keeps coming back from the ground, well, great, just keep cutting it. If you have a rocket stove, you can cook on it. You know, you get some poles like this. I could cook a meal on this one stick, you know, with a high efficiency stove. You know, so it's no big deal. You got a hurricane coming, don't worry. I got plenty of biomass, you know.
So is the nitrogen in the roots too, as well as when you cut it off,
Yes.
the nitrogen comes out the root?
Yes, a lot of green material is high in nitrogen because it's a big part of the plant processes. So when you drop this on the ground, it's high in nitrogen, and there's also nodules on the roots with the nitrogen fixing bacteria, and it will slough off roots, it'll drop roots because it's been damaged and doesn't need to support as much, and the roots will grow back and you can do it over and over again.
Would a tree like that be good for
as a fodder plant for like cattle and goats and.
Some are, some aren't. I'm not sure if they would like it or not. The Leucaena lucephala is a really good one. They call it the alfalfa of the tropics. And I do have lots of seeds for that one that you guys can have. That's a very fast-growing nitrogen fixture, and they have used it specifically to feed animals with. It grows back over and over again. Cut the top of it off, feed it. You know, a few months later, you cut the top off again, feed the whole top. It's great. Plant enough of them, you don't have to have any grass, you know. This here, this is a yam tree. Talking about stupid, worthless trees. This is a sweet gum tree here, which people will tell you, oh, that's a trash tree, man. It's a mess. It drops little things all over that hurt your feet, which is true. It does drop little things all over the ground which hurt your feet. The seed pods are pokey. This is a sweet gum tree that started here in the yard, and I used it as a trellis for yams. There's about 3 different varieties of African yams growing at the base here. And that's actually one of the air potatoes or yams. You plant one of these in the ground, and 2 years later you get a root that's like 30 pounds. We were talking about it a little earlier with the first couple of folks that were here. I plant these things all over the place, and they come back.
And that's the air potato.
That's it. This is, well, there's 2 air potatoes. There's the air potato that's the invasive air potato that everybody's trying to get rid of.
Right.
They also call this air potato, but it's a really good edible. The other air potato is toxic. It has a lot of diasgenin in it, which is a hormone that can cause sterility and hair loss, and it's not cool.
Potatoes are more like round.
Yeah, they're much rounder.
Those are the
These
toxic
have these funky shapes to them. These also have more arrow-shaped leaves, whereas the other air potatoes have heart-shaped leaves. You know, so that's a big difference. This is chaya, this is another species of the Mexican tree spinach. This one has the more lobed leaves. This one also blooms a lot more and attracts more butterflies, but I think the leaves are a little coarser and they're not as good as the vegetables. That's a trade-off. But this tree here was a few years old, and it was about 10 foot tall, so I cut the top of it off and then have used it for trellis. And it's worked so well because it's still alive. You know, this is still a gum tree under here. In the spring, it grows back a little bit. If it gets too tall, I'll cut it. I don't want it to shade out the rest of the yard. But unlike a regular trellis where it would rot out in the ground or I'd have to grow it over and over again, this supports itself and it'll stay alive for years. You can cut these things over and over again. Particularly if you cut a tree when it's dormant in the winter, you can take even an oak tree and cut it, and the shoots will come back over and over again. There are trees, it's called coppicing, if you do it at the ground, or pollarding if you cut it higher. So it's repeated biomass. In England, they've done this for firewood. They've cut the tree down to its trunk about every 8 to 10 years, and it'll grow a bunch of new trunks, nice straight wood. Then they'll cut it again, and the stump keeps expanding with more shoots. And they just wait. Every 10 years, they go out in the winter, they cut all of it down, and it does it over and over again. They've had trees they've been doing this with for 500 or 600 years, and it's not killed the tree. If you do it during the middle of the summer, it may or may not kill it. If you do it in the fall, right as it's trying to go to sleep, and then it starts growing back, and then the freezes come, you'll probably kill it. But and you don't want to do it at the time in the summer because infection may set in too. So there's certain times when it's pulled a lot of the sap back into the roots beneath the ground. You cut it in the winter, it's, you know, it comes back again. So it was just one of those cool things. Over and over again, I can grow yams on here, and there's some big roots beneath the ground here. We're coming up on 2 years. It's about time to start digging these suckers up and see what happens. This here is called Suriname purslane. This is a really good salad green if you all want to take pieces off of this, if anybody wants to grow it. All you got to do is break a piece off and stick it in the ground, and it will grow. And you can taste the leaves. Just take pieces, and all you need is about 4 inches of it to stick it in the ground, and it'll grow. And if anybody doesn't get some, I've got some more out back I can share.
Yeah. Speaking about that, David, when are we supposed to be cutting? During the talk, or when walk, or after?
I usually just go around and chop what everybody wants at the end, but you can take pieces now if you want to too. I'm going to definitely cut down some of these Mexican sunflowers for everybody to have. They're great amount of mulch and fertilizer. This is a improved variety of loquat.
They grow well.
Loquat is one of the best trees for this area, but a lot of the fruits are, most of the trees are seedlings, and the fruit's about that big, and they're sort of sweet tart. I've had fruit that are about that big, like nice size, plum size, that are very sweet fruit, and that's what one of these here is. I grafted this 2 years ago, and it's, it'll mature into a tree. The top of it will be nice, big, improved fruit. The bottom of it, if I let any suckers come out, will be the normal sweet, sour fruit. Even the seedlings are really good, but loquats are spectacularly easy to graft. If any of you guys have seen my website, thesurvivalgardener.com, look up grafting on there, and I've got a ton on grafting. I was scared of grafting for years, and I broke my fear of it, and I've realized I was really stupid to not start grafting a long time ago, because one of your neighbors has a tree, and so you've got a tree in your yard, and you're like, man, I wish that this tree didn't have such nasty sour oranges on it, but your neighbor's got a tree over there that's got great grapefruit. You can go and cut a piece off of his tree and stick it on your tree and grow it. If you've got a loquat that doesn't make very good fruit, what a lot of people do is like, I hate that tree, and they cut the tree to the ground, and so they've maybe destroyed 10 years of root growth. And whereas if they just grafted into it, they would be eating loquats in a year of a better variety. It takes a long time for a tree to build up good growth beneath the ground. So if it's anything that you can graft on top of, oh, that's a nasty apple tree, oh, I don't like those pears, or that persimmon never makes me any fruit, don't worry about it. Find somebody that has a good one and graft. It will take you 10 minutes as a beginner to put a little graft on there. And if it takes, you have a new fruit tree. If it doesn't take, you don't have any loss because you didn't like the tree anyway. You just try it again next year. It's not hard, but if you look it up, I've got pictures of me grafting this loquat from a little piece off of another
variety
tree.
of loquat is that?
It is actually, it's from a variety. A guy had an orchard of loquats and a whole bunch of them crossed. So it's an improved one because the parents were all large fruited ones. So chances are those genes have passed on. I think this is the one I called string trimmer because my friend killed the original tree with a string trimmer on accident. And so to save the tree, I went around and grafted it into a whole bunch of other loquats in the yard so I wouldn't lose the variety. Because I already had 2 or 3 years of growing into it. And the tree started to wilt, and I went cut off a bunch of budwood, and I just tacked it all over the yard. So,
Do one of your air potatoes?
yeah, if you, those are the white ones. The